Okay.
All right, thank you guys, everybody, for coming on this Sunday morning. This is our 14th, second to last class, and I have here Tim Dyson and of the Emerald Heart School in the UK, who I've worked with maybe for the past 1 or 2 years, and he's been a teacher of mine, helping me learn a lot more about the realm of entities and energies that have a parasitic nature on us. And I love him because his approach is really balanced and grounded. So Tim, could you just introduce yourself a little bit about who you
Yeah.
are and your background?
Yeah. So hi everyone. How to start? Yes. Well, basically, I think I was like many people, probably many of you. I was very psychic as a child, as a small child, and connected very easily to kind of spirit realms. And I had a spirit friend that my mum thinks was an imaginary friend, but I know it was a little bit more than an imaginary friend. But I tried for many years to close that down in my teenage years and did the whole party life, did the wild punk rock thing, and projected everything outwards in terms of political activism and things like that. Found myself in a bit of a mess at a certain point, and sort of found myself gradually coming towards spirituality in various ways through qigong and tai chi and things like this, and then that developed in various ways over many years. But of course, as I came back into it, many of those things opened up again. And I spent probably about 3 or 4 years seeing into the other realms on pretty much a constant basis, which made it very hard to function in a kind of normal way. Um, and then at a certain point, it started to close down and become more balanced in that when I was working with someone, because at a certain point I started working with others, I tended to be able to see things when I needed to rather than all the time. So, from being in the supermarket and seeing beings jump off the cakes onto people and things like that, I was it went it went to a space where I wasn't seeing all of that all the time, thank goodness. But when I was working with a client, then I was shown what I needed to see in that regard. Um, but as I developed more, I ended up working with the Emerald Heart Light and becoming a practitioner within that approach, to becoming, one of the probably two leading practitioners, we could say. And at that point, I realized something. I realized that from at least how I think of it is that the more light we can connect with and the more light we start to carry, the more we don't need to worry so much about these things. And they can't get at us so easily. We become too bright for them. And using the tools of the Emerald Heart and also what I learned beforehand, when I work with a person, I seek to kind of grow their light, you could say. And sometimes I approach a problem like an entity problem directly, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I will just work on shifting something in their consciousness. Because if we think of this all in terms of consciousness, if our consciousness is at the right point, then what happens is we start to supersede those kind of lower consciousnesses. And then when we're working with people, we're seeking to help them do the same as well. And in my experience at least, the biggest problem with working with someone who has a long history with entities and someone who's aware of that, it's maybe rather different if they're unaware of it. But if someone is aware of it, the biggest problem is in taking their mind out of that level of consciousness. So you can clear stuff with them, you can do all sorts of things, but their mind is still functioning on the level of entity consciousness. And so they're endlessly trying to draw you into that level of consciousness with them and get you to kind of collude in a way in their story.
Right. That's
What
so
we
true.
do.
That
Yeah,
colluding in the story, and you'll see that in Facebook groups, right? Where
yeah,
there's that one person who's just like, my drama, my story, and they're trying
yeah,
to kind of pull
yeah,
you into that wave of like
yeah.
energy, that triggers you too,
Mm.
and and brings you into their vibration, because as soon as you loop into that, it
Mhm.
gives them more juice.
It does, it feeds it. It
It
feeds the
feeds the
problem.
entity.
I mean, what you're doing is you're kind of trying to hold a higher ground
Mhm.
and to point to the right direction. And you're there going, no, look, this way, this way. But they're trying to get you to go their way. So
Right.
you have to always try and find a way to influence them towards the higher ground and not let them get you lost in their world, which is all around darkness and negativity. So that doesn't mean you don't have to help them with the negativity and the darkness that's causing them a problem, but you've got to hold your space. You can't get lost in their space.
Right.
And I think this is maybe the key point for people that have an interest in helping people genuinely, genuinely rather. You will come up against this kind of problem. So anyone that works in the healing field will at some point start to come up against these kind of energies.
Right. And I just want to share with people how and why I'm even having this class. And essentially, I'm a homeopath. I didn't think I'm going to be working with entities, or even had what that was in my mind. But working with autistic kids, for example, you can heal all these levels of energy in them. And autistic kids can be very psychic, and they can tell you exactly what they need. And I was working with a psychic, very autistic child in Los Angeles who is telling me, like, right direct into my mind, exactly what she needed. And we cleared all this stuff. And eventually she got to the point where I need somebody who does Reiki, who can clear weird energies. We found someone who's like, she has got entities galore. And we started seeing her channel the voices of these entities. And this woman is the woman who is very Christian, really like does the Lord's Prayer and screams, Jesus Christ, get these demons to leave this child. It worked. and then I got more curious, and then I had another case, and this was a boy with pandas, who I had healed, from the medical reasons for why he had his infections a couple years previous. And then he got hit in the head with a soccer ball, which kind of rattled things and opened things up to entities. And he became like exorcist child. I mean, like seeing demons, holes in the ground. His mother was like a wolf. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I would give remedies, and it would shift him for an hour or 5 minutes, and then he'd go back into it. And the energy that was in there was so powerful. And that energy, sometimes when it comes, it's like, you think you have power over me, I've got power over this situation. And it becomes this like power battle. And I called the mom, and I was like, I know this is something way darker. And I put her in touch with an exorcist guy in New Jersey who traveled to her house and spent 3 days clearing stuff. And that healed this child. So I had to learn, because this was like a place where I was curious about. And eventually, on another case, a mom that I was working with found Tim. And I read Tim's bio, and I was like, oh, this is a guy that could help me and teach me to learn about this. So I just wanted to like tell that to people, because homeopathy operates in this range of energy and this spectrum, but there's this whole other spiritual spectrum way out there and beyond the material realm. how would you define what an entity is, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good. I mean, it's a huge subject, but I would say an entity is basically it's something that has independent existence in the sense of it has its own level of consciousness, um, and it will be parasitic in nature in one way or another. It will be parasitic in nature. And so it will attach to a person to derive something, some kind of feeding from that person. It may be very unintelligent beyond the level of needing to feed from that person, or it may be more intelligent. It may actually have some kind of strategy or a plan to really mess up that person's life for a particular reason, possibly. Particularly when you get to more the demonic end of the spectrum. But I would say, to sum it up in one sentence, an entity is a life form that has a parasitic agenda. That's how I would describe it.
Okay.
But, and this is where it gets weirder, I think sometimes human beings are able to create entities through their own subconscious, and when that happens, you have the sense of there is a life force at first, but then as you get into it more and more, you start to realize that what you thought was something that was separate to the person in terms of it having its own life force, you realize that actually it hasn't. Its life force is dependent on the person because the person has actually created it. So it's a huge field, and that's getting a bit more technical. But sometimes you will have a person who has a very powerful subconscious. You will often find it with people that actually carry a lot of light. They're often the ones that have the biggest self-sabotage patterns, whether it's a child or an adult, and they will sometimes be able to create things, which is different from pulling things in, but they might do that as well. So I think one thing I would say that I think is really important to understand, I believe at least, is that you won't be able to help everyone. It just, sometimes you won't be able to find a way with everyone. So if you're working in this kind of way, you do what you can, but sometimes you will have to just walk away. You won't be able to deal with it. And it may be that something has to happen in that person's life first, or that, something has to change in their circumstance for someone to be able to help them. So I think, in the early days, I used to get really, like, I wouldn't admit that I couldn't deal with it. I would, spend ages and ages and ages on a particular case. And then in the end, I realized that sometimes you just can't. Sometimes for whatever reason, you can't help everyone.
Right.
And that was kind of like a real revelation moment for me. And I think it's important to understand that our time is finite. We're here for a certain number of years, and we have to be able to choose our time and energy wisely in who we work with. So it's great from a learning point of view, but sometimes you don't want to let your whole life get bogged down with one case, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You might just need to move on or send them somewhere else.
Right. Right. So, with children, I mean, what is it that draws entities and to certain people? I mean, I feel like I've seen a lot of autistic kids, for example, who are lonely. They can't communicate. And so they're not communicating with the world around them, but they're so energetically sensitive that this energy comes in and says, I'll be your friend.
Yeah.
There's this kind of subconscious drawing in of energies to befriend you.
Yeah.
And the immune system can be part of that. It's like the actual vibration of your authentic self is kind of so weak and that you don't know who you are, that you kind of mesh and attract things in, right?
Well, I mean, I've seen it in adults as well. Actually, you sometimes find an adult that's very lonely or very alone, and they inadvertently bring things in. So it's not just in children, but it's probably more difficult in children because it's harder to maybe get a child, particularly an autistic child, to understand that they need to stop doing what they're doing, which is allowing all these things in. It's possibly easier with an adult in that regard. It's sometimes the case that people bring things through with them from earlier lives. I've come across that quite a lot of times, where someone has actually brought something through several lifetimes. They have some kind of symbiotic relationship and they just keep bringing something through. They can be very difficult to get rid of because they're so intertwined. And with children, it's difficult because even if you get rid of something successfully, if they're open to the spirit world and they're lonely and alone, there's a very good chance that they'll bring something else in again. And so you end up back at square one trying to get rid of something new. So it's not easy if you take on those kind of cases. I mean, I think this is where the key point is to try and change something in them at the level of their deeper consciousness. I mean, in the Emerald Heart approach, and I'm sure in the homeopathic approach, generally, you have the option of trying to change that person's vibration in some way or another, where they are maybe more happy, they're easier in themselves, things like this. If you can start to do that, change the fundamental basis of how they are, then that might change their relationship to life and to the spirit world. But of course, if you're talking about an extremely autistic child, there is not maybe a quick solution here. It's maybe, something that you have to work with over time. And I think this is what I think is one of the crucial points in working in this way. Is you're not necessarily looking for someone to completely turn around and have their life transformed instantly. Yes, it's great when that happens, and it does sometimes happen. But when you're talking about someone like an extremely autistic child or a very disturbed adult, what you're looking for is little signs of progress. That's really what you're looking for. You're looking for them to feed back to you, or maybe their parents feed back to you, signs that something has changed for the better. If they're used to going to rages all the time, there's less of that. It's not so frequent. Maybe the rages move through quicker. These are the kind of things you're looking for. And if you're, 4 or 5 months and you're not seeing any change at any level, then I would, even earlier than that, then I would say you probably need to ask the question, should I be working with this person? Maybe this isn't someone I should be working with. I mean, how I work is I give someone an essence to take, and I would expect by the end of that 4-week period to see some sign that something has changed, even if everything's worse, because at least then I know that something's changing. And it may be you've opened a door and you've opened what you could say is a can of worms, and it's all gone mad. But at least you're seeing some kind of level of change in the person and their circumstance. So these, I think, are really important points about working in this field. Is, you may find, okay, I've cleared or I believe I've cleared something from this person, but they still seem deeply disturbed. But are they less deeply disturbed than they were before you cleared something?
Right.
You know, this is the
Yeah.
thing, because you could, you know, that's what you're looking for, is that little bit of change.
Right.
Then you've got something you can build on.
Yeah. And sometimes it's challenging because people with negativity don't want to admit to positive change.
No, no,
They
that's
want
right.
to just be like, victim, it's terrible, da, da, da. And you have to intuit sometimes if that positive change is there. You know, group of remedies is chlorum, iodine, all the negative halogens. Giving those homeopathically really helps shift people from constantly harping on the negative.
Yeah,
And that's also the energy that also has to say no, because on some level, these people are really negative, but they can't say no to the negative entity
yeah, yeah.
coming at them. They can't say, leave. I don't want you. I want to be positive, happy. They don't want to stand in their power. They
Right.
want to stand in, I'm in my state of negativity. I'm in state of victimhood. I allow whatever to come in to affect me. And that's the consciousness that you need to shift.
I tend to think of it as like a radio dial, and people that are caught on that kind of level of, you know, that's how they're functioning. They're tuned to a negative radio station, and so everything about the world is projecting that back to them. They're projecting it out to the world, and it's mirroring that back to them. So what you're seeking to do is change the dial on the radio to one that's more positive. So when I feed back with someone after 4 weeks, which is how I normally approach it, I want to hear, you know, even if it's like I felt happy for 2 days, or I had an hour where I felt different. Even if it's just 1 hour, they felt different than they usually feel. So what you've got there is they've had an experience of a different radio station, if we use that analogy. Then you've got something that you can try and build a momentum on, a different momentum than the one that they're living with. But at first, those experiences of feeling good or better, they don't feel very real to the person because they're so used to this other way, which feels so something they got to know. If it's an adult, over many years; if it's a child, still over quite
For
often
many lifetimes.
many lifetimes possibly. So what you're building on is something that feels incredibly fragile at first, and to the person feels less real than the negative experiences. So what you're trying to do is change that balance, and that's why it can take a while. So in a way, the entity stuff is just a part of a picture.
Mm-hmm.
You
Do you
know,
feel that the people to really shift need some sort of like daily exercise or spiritual practice to kind of change their vibration and lift them up?
well, it's a good question, and I always recommend it to people that they do something. I mean, I had a client come to me recently, an American guy in his early 20s, and he's obsessed by entities and, you know, been around to a million people trying to look for help. And I told him, you need to join a gym. And he was like, but I've come to you for an entity clearance. I've spent all this money on all these people. And I said, yeah. I don't even want to talk about that. I'll work with you again when you've joined the gym and go to the gym at least twice a week. And he was really angry at me, but he did it. And already he starts to feel a bit different.
Right. And that idea of like, you have to take ownership over your
Yeah.
experience. You know, I had Kathleen King. So I have a friend who teaches the brain retraining, which is you're in this kind of looping and then you kind of got to come back into it. And she came to me for homeopathy and I was like, I have nothing to tell you, but you can do this yourself. And that's the ultimate lesson in dealing with these parasitic energies is
Yeah.
finding the self-love within yourself to resource from within. And so let's talk about like the healing professions, because sometimes I feel like the healing professions can aggravate people or keep them in their loops of like, I can't do this on my own. And not only that, healers get entities because you're going into the entity energy, you're opening yourself up. So I have a good friend here in Ashland who started going to family constellation circles. Do you know what that is?
Yes.
That's when people sit in circle and they open themselves up and channel. And she's had a month or two of horrible, what feels like entities come in, I think, from this. So is it even worth, like, what do you say to that?
Well, I actually did a constellation thing. It wasn't based on my family. It was around some of the Emerald Heart people. We did one time with this woman. Someone set it up. She thought it'd be a good idea. And for me, it was awful. It was like some kind of really raw amateur dramatics with people shouting at people. And one woman was screaming at me about why I wasn't there for her in her childhood. And I'm thinking, well, I didn't even know you when you were in your childhood. Why are you screaming this? I had no idea what was going on. And I thought if I wanted to join Amdram, then I would do it. I don't need this. But I can quite believe that a lot of things could fly around in that scenario. I could really believe that. But I think the healing thing. I mean, it's interesting because when I first started talking about entities and spirit attachments and things like this was a long time ago. And at that time, no one in the kind of what we could call sort of modern healing or new agey kind of circles, no one wanted to acknowledge that. Everyone wanted to talk about angels. And no one wanted to admit that the dark side even existed.
This is in Reiki. Also.
Right. Yeah. Well, Reiki, I mean, all of those systems.
Yeah. And by the way, Tim's talking about the Emerald Heart, and the Emerald Heart was started by this guy who's David Ashworth, who is a Reiki master, who wrote this book called Dancing with the Devil as You Channel the Light, which is really about, it talks about the dark side of psychic attack when you open yourself up to other people with negative energies, how that is a complete, you're channeling, creating an opening to it come into yourself. So tell us more about that and the Emerald.
Well, I think we've gone in a sense, we've gone from a situation where everyone wanted to be in La La Land a bit to now everyone being obsessed by entities. So we've gone almost in a complete circle. So I get clients that are just obsessed by entities, all the time obsessed by entities. Whereas before, no one wanted to talk about that. No one wanted to acknowledge it. So it's almost like we've gone in a full circle. And I think that what's happening in the healing world is that people are also getting, well, they've become aware of it, but they've also kind of not really understood it. So you've got healers that now understand such a thing exists, but they don't really know what they're doing. So they are at risk. They don't really know what their clients are really dealing with. And sometimes the worst thing you could do is bring a load of energy into a person. Sometimes that can actually be the worst possible thing to do. And if you're going to do something, you have to do it in a very, very precisely targeted way. And sometimes people just think, well, I'll just open up their central channel, bring in all this Reiki energy, and then the person goes into absolute chaos, because they've got all these problems inside that then become all agitated and awake. So you have to be really careful with this. So what I end up with is quite a lot of healers coming to me that really have gotten a problem. And also people, the latest ones I get are people that have been doing ayahuasca and the toad venom stuff. I get a lot of people from that community coming now because they've opened themselves up in a really unsafe way and they've got things attached to them.
Right.
So, I mean, I always think don't mess with things like that. Your stuff will naturally open up when it's ready. If you try and force something to open before you're ready for it, I won't say to anyone, you mustn't do it. But if they ask my advice, I just say don't.
Right.
So we have this awareness, at least now, of when something's gone wrong, people recognize things. But I think the problem in now time is that people think that everything they feel that's not good is an entity.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you're just angry.
So
maybe it's not an entity.
How do you differentiate that? Someone asked in the beginning, like when my child goes into a rage and starts talking in a different voice, is that always an entity or is that just him? you know?
Well, it's a good question, isn't it? I mean, I think all you can do as the person that's trying to work with him is try and feel into it. But for sure, if you find a way to reduce the level of rage, then that's got to be a good thing, whether it's an entity at the back of that or not.
Right.
But in my experience with autistic children, which is quite limited, I should point out, they often have a lot of anger because the world is a frustrating place for them and they don't know how to kind of function in it. So there often is a lot of frustration and anger there. But the more you work with an individual, if you kind of get it where something's starting to shift, you will essentially be clearing the decks a bit. It's like a glass table that you keep removing a layer of dust from. And at some point you will start to see, oh, actually, I think there's definitely a distinct being in this child that's influencing this child.
Right. And that's what
But
I've
when they come to you, you might not get that at first. So you just have to start from where you are with them.
Right.
And just keep going until things become clearer.
Yeah, yeah. And with remedies, you can give them and it peels away. And then it becomes a lot clearer that, wow, either I'm dealing with an entity here or you just lift that child up and they're able to be a lot better. I did want to say that I've seen a lot of entity stuff in families who the parents are working in healing professions, police, like police officers. So they're like dealing with negative energies and bringing them home. I remember one family had 2 boys who were raging all the time, and the dad was in working with violent offenders, and he would be nervous every time he would come home, but that energy would come home with him, and what else?
Well, that's a good point, because what you're pointing to there is the environment as the problem. And I would say that with children, it's very often the parents that are actually creating a lot of the problem. Right. And what you might need to do, in my experience at least, is find a way to work with the parent.
Right.
Sometimes I've been very direct and said, well, actually, I don't want to work with your child right now. I want to work with you right now. Mm-hmm. Because, often an extremely autistic kid, well, why are they extremely autistic? I mean, we could look at it on many levels, but maybe a big part of it is they're carrying some kind of karmic family weight. And this is how it's manifested. So, often the way to approach it is through the parents, I think.
Yeah. And how do you help that? I mean, I've definitely seen families where they're like, it's a kid and the parents want to help their kid, but their kid is carrying this karmic weight where, you feel into their energy field, and on some level they feel like they've murdered like 1,000 somebody, or and the energy that is in them almost feels demonic. And can you describe like that feeling of what you would even say is almost demonic in nature?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I've connected with really what I would call demonic energy, it's very different than what I would call a kind of active negativity. So for me, negativity often is it tends to often be a kind of more active feeling. It's dark in its way of operating, but there's something that feels active about it. When I've connected with what I would say was something truly demonic, it felt just like a presence, like an energetic presence. It wasn't necessarily seeking to do anything. It was just there. And it would, when I have connected with it in the past, it's kind of rocked me inside to actually feel that close to me, that demonic presence close to me. And every part of my being was screaming, run, in some way or another. Because, when you're up against something like that, what I think you're talking about, really, if we're using sort of more religious language, is pure evil. It's really like pure evil. And when you're near it, it's a horrible feeling. How to deal with that? Well, I tend to think, perhaps it's my happy delusion, but in my own experience at least, when I felt that my light got to a certain brightness and my energy became strong and refined enough that things couldn't stick to me for very long. And if something did stick to me or does stick to me, it tends to have to leave pretty quick
Mm-hmm.
because my inherent state will deal with it quite quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, what you have with a lot of healers is people that are actually often, they don't have enough energy force on one hand to really bring things out of them. So information of one sort or another is sticking to them and it's not being pushed out of them. So their own energy system isn't pushing it beyond their aura and out of their system. And or their brightness is not sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
So the more you have your inner brightness, the more you're aware on one hand if something's got you a bit, because when you have more inner bright, you feel it when something's got hold of you, but also your own brightness becomes very good at forcing this stuff out because something dark doesn't want to stay. It really doesn't want to stay.
What about the idea, though, also that, because I've definitely seen a subset of really sparkly, happy, phosphorusy, bright kids attract in like the dark stuff, like the idea that light attracts, that light can pull in the dark too.
Yeah, but don't forget, there's always dark, even where there's a lot of light.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, where you have a lot of light, you often have very deep dark.
Right. So there's just polarity that you're seeing. You're not
On the level of dualism, yes,
right.
we would say there's a polarity there.
Right.
So it's the same with, you get adults, and I get them come to me as clients and students, and often they have a lot of a lot of light, and they may be healers, they may be doing good work, and they say, oh, I feel like I'm doing fine at a certain level, but I need to up my game. I feel like I'm kind of plateauing on a certain level. Can you help me get to my next level of development? So you then start working with this person. You then start to help reveal to them what it is that's holding them back, why they're stuck at a certain level, and they freak out because they've programmed themselves to believe that they're a certain way, and you reveal to them how much darkness they actually have in them. And
Yeah.
we're all like this.
Right. Right. That
It's just
there's a
with
lot
some
of
people it's
people,
more
new
hidden.
age people or something, whatever,
Yeah.
people walking around thinking they're holier than thou. And I had a friend here in Ashland who she thought she's just really, so special, and she administers special medicine from the rainforest, and she's got her rattles and her special shawls and her malas and everything. And she came to live in my house, and talk about entity energies. And I want to talk about this, like people who want to be your friend, they're like, oh, I'm so this, I want to be your friend. And they're so attractive, and you think, oh, this is such a nice person. Sure, you can stay in my house. You're so nice. And then I had like nightmares at night, like the worst nightmares.
Oh, yeah.
And then eventually she stayed for 2 months in my living room.
Yeah.
And the only reason why I got her to leave was I moved houses. And I realized, holy cow, did so much energy get leached from me. And with her, all of her, I want to help, I want to give, she was so like, every time I gave her the opportunity, she'd be like, it's all about me. Like it was, and I realized, wow, this is a parasitic energy full of entities here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want to like highlight people. There are people who walk around out there who think that they are helping, and they like, it's like they're there to manipulate you, and then they're there like ultimately to like get their suckers into you.
Yeah.
And friends,
like
a lot of you guys
like
have had friends who are like this, you think that they're a friend, and ultimately you're just like, they're bleeding me dry.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. Does she behave like this because she's full of parasitic entities? or has she attracted them in because she's parasitic in her nature?
Right.
So this is the thing, a lot of people, I mean, that's an extreme example, but even all healers, all of us, all human beings, we all have aspects to our characters that are less than light. All of us do. We all manipulate at times, particularly often with partners, romantic partners. We know how to manipulate them to get what we want. We all do it. We all play these kind of games. And once we start to really be serious about spiritual growth and development, then we have to start to see these sides of us. And just because we're healers or light workers, it doesn't mean that we're somehow immune to having to do that work but in my experience, sometimes when you get someone who, is often quite sorted out on many levels, sometimes when you start to help them see where they're not, they really want to run for the hills. They don't want to work with you because you shatter this identity construct that they formed about themselves, and they're not prepared to do the work.
Right.
So, we all have, so where do entities come from? We could ask that question, I mean, I would say they definitely come from distinct realms where they live. But I also think that maybe human beings at some level ultimately have created them over the eons. I think that's quite possible as well, by our own behaviors, by our own darkness. So, it's a huge subject when you get into that one. And I don't want to get too metaphysical.
Yeah. How important is it though? So so there's the two ways of, so far that I hear from you, of really dealing with entities. The primary way and the way that you want to work with people is increasing their light, increasing their vibration, right? Because that ultimately, changing their frequency, allows things not to stick. But for things that are like just stuck, like you just have this one stuck issue, and like working directly on the entity and doing entity clearings, how specific do you have to get? Do you have to say, okay, this is an entity from an ancestor, from a past life? Is it from a past life? Is it from an ancestor? Is it from an extraterrestrial? And I find a lot of people who do this work, they get really specific about that, and they try to look in and see that. Can you describe some of that?
Well, I mean, in my experience of working with people, and I can't really speak about other people's experience of working, but in mine, the more you can hone in on it and the more information you can get on it, the better. But there is a danger that you end up just getting lost in the gathering information, because you've got to remember that you're gathering information for a reason. You're trying to understand how this being functions. What does it do? How does it do it? And why does it do it? But you're also looking for the connection with the person, between the being and the person, to understand, why has this person attracted this being? What's this about? What is this really about in terms of their evolution? And so you're trying to understand them, and you're trying to understand their relationship to this being, and you're trying to understand the being. So essentially, you're trying to get information on all of these three aspects. And I think the more you can get that, the more chance you've got of clearing it. But you mustn't lose sight of the fact that ultimately you're trying to clear it, and not just get too bound up. Because often the person will egg you on as well.
I have this great aunt who was suicidal because she was persecuted, and then it becomes part of your story that you loop.
So you have to remember, you're coming from your consciousness, and what's in your consciousness. And what tends to happen is the client wants you to look at it from the point of view of their consciousness. So sometimes, I found, once I've been doing this for quite a while, sometimes I would know straight away what the deeper issue of the person was. And that if I could deal with that issue, then everything above that line, i.e. the entity problems they were having would just get taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
Other times, you have to kind of take the entity consciousness on more directly. So it really depends.
Right.
You know, it's really, you have to work it out. But if you try and approach it from the point of view of, when I encounter someone who's got problems with entity consciousness, I'm going to try and get rid of it for them. You are putting a hell of a lot of pressure on yourself, is what I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, you know, dial it back a bit and say, I'm looking to see a change in this person, to help be a part of that, making a change in that person. And I will just do my best. And, you know, if at some point you find yourself confronted with some entity that you have to take on, then you have to take it on. But I wouldn't approach it like sort of guns blazing and ready for war, you know, because what might happen is you might find that you don't get anywhere, and then you feel like you're useless and everything you've done was a waste of your time and energy.
Mm-hmm.
I would bring it back a notch. And don't forget, a lot of these people have had problems with entities for decades, possibly longer, possibly lifetimes.
Mm-hmm.
To think that you're going to resolve all their problems on that level instantly. Well, so I would say, remember, the key point is the growth of the person. That's the key point. Don't go off down the branch of the tree into entity world and forget that it's the branch of a tree. You know what I mean?
Right. And you gave me a nice quote last time we talked, whereas like these, when you have the entity energies come in, or you feel like you do, these both block and stimulate evolution. So it's a blockage, but it's also, you said God gets pissed that you won't change.
Yeah.
You know, so take this entity and like see it.
Well, you think about it like this. If a person refuses to make the changes that their higher self has already worked out before they incarnated in this life, that they're going to do with this life, the things they're meant to be doing, they've agreed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then they come into this life and they try and live a material life with no spiritual component. They just drink and mess around, or what, in whatever way
they're super spiritual and they're not in their bodies.
And they're not in their bodies, all these kind of things. So basically something isn't going right based on the life path that they've already agreed with their own higher self. Mm-hmm. So how does God, if we use the G word, get that person to wake up and start to change? Well, you've got to give them a problem, haven't you? Because it's only for having a problem that they're going to look for a solution. And in looking for a solution, they might well start to grow. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many people come to things because they've got a problem? Most people, actually. Mm-hmm. Rare is the person that goes, I want to come to spirituality because I'm interested in spirituality. Most people come because initially they've got a problem. Mm-hmm. So you give them a problem, they go and they go to a Reiki healer and they have some experiences, and then they think, well, maybe I might become a Reiki healer, or I might become this, or I might become that. Mm-hmm. At some point, they might get a solution to the problem, but the key point is the problem got them to grow.
Evolutionary. And that's where you feel, you know, healing is about the process of evolution.
Yeah, yeah. So from that point of view, having an entity problem is no different than having a health problem, like, you know, ME or cancer even. You know, it's like you're looking for a solution and you end up looking for a solution in a spiritual sphere because Western medicine isn't giving you the solution, and you end up growing. And that's really what it's all about. That's what the whole game is about.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, you have to see entities can be quite useful to God.
Yeah, entities can be. Well, how, you know, I kind of want to, I know we've been talking for close to an hour now, and I want to kind of sum up our discussion. How do you help people grow in their light? And I'd love to do a meditation to help, that you could guide us in to help people grow in their light.
Well, I think it's maybe the first thing is to be clear about what the process of growth really is on a deeper level. So when we start to come to spirituality, when we start to have an interest in it, what is happening is that the light that's at the deepest part of our heart is starting to become a little bit brighter and a little bit more active. And it's starting to move up and down and become a little bit more activated. And from a bigger point of view, we could say that God, the consciousness that is God, is calling to his own creation. And that part of you that is God is calling back to God. So there's a connection beginning to be established on a more conscious level. And as that happens, the person starts to develop an interest. And as they start to develop an interest, they will probably go to things like Reiki and all sorts of things. But what they're really looking for is spiritual light, because it's spiritual light that will grow their own light. It will start to reveal to them who and what they are at the deepest of levels, which is God, which is light. So they're looking for something or someone that will help them to realize that. And they may take a long journey. Well, they inevitably will. But they may start at very much a beginning energetic level. And then they may eventually come to what we could say is a teacher of light. Or they may discover a teacher of light quite early. It's hard to say. It depends on many things. But what you're doing as you step more and more into your life is learning to help others do the same. And you're offering ways of them for them to do that, whatever ways you use. So, I use essences, I use spiritual programs, spiritual and energetic programs, which I plug people into. But, everyone has their ways. But really what all people are seeking when they reach a certain point of development is light, is spiritual light. And that light enables their inner brightness to start to shine. And when their inner brightness is shining, then they're not so troubled by all of these things. And they can then start to help others shine. And so it goes on. And this is how consciousness develops, basically. Light is kind of like the means in a way. So this is how I would say, this is the game we're all in. We're all of us in it. And we're all at different levels and different places within the game. But we're all looking for ways, whether we realize it or not, to deepen and to grow more. And so when you have a person with a problem, yes, you're looking to help them with a problem. But how do you really help them? You don't want to take away the problem and then they just go back to how things were and live a rubbish life. You're looking to help that person live a better life. So that's really where you always have got to be coming from, I would say. And a better life can look very differently in different people, but you're always seeking to help that person live a more congruent life with their own spiritual truth.
Right. Beautiful. So
I see we've got a lot of questions.
Yeah, does anybody have any particular questions for Tim? What I would like is to have some of your questions answered, and then for Tim to offer a meditation, and then we'll take a break and talk about parasites, which is very similar.
Yeah.
So
I'm just looking through here what's been written. Yeah. Well, the first question, I think I might well have answered this. Right. Yes, it can be the subconscious. It's not necessarily always an entity. When a child goes into a rage and their voice change.
Do you find yourself helping the entities as well? Someone asked, do you help them go back to the light?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's really, the best way, I believe. I have had instances where I've had to find a way to kill an entity within a person because it's refused to leave. But ultimately, I tend to approach it as you want to help whatever it is to go to where they should be. So if it's an entity, it needs to go back to where it's meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a spirit that's attached to a person, you need to help that spirit move on, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because everything is where it is, and everything is developing over the eons. Maybe at some point a demon becomes an angel. Maybe, yeah. If it's possible for angels to become demons, then at some point it must be possible for demons to become angels.
Yeah.
So we're all in the game. Nothing is separate from the game, really.
Mm-hmm.
And the game is evolution.
Yeah, someone asked, do we give homeopathic remedies? And I just like to say, the next half of today's class will be on parasites and homeopathic remedies, which is similar to this. But essentially, homeopathic remedies is all about trying to evolve the person and help the person let go of the layers that are keeping them in limitation or keeping them in loops or keeping them in negativity. So that is a fundamental way. So Tim works with essences or flower essences, which is very similar to remedies in that. And, the Emerald Heart is a school of energy healing that this guy, David Ashworth, developed. And he worked with homeopathy as well. So, all realms of kind of energy healing and just healing in general is all towards evolution. And this is why just being in like this place of palliative, giving, maybe antibiotics and pharmaceuticals or even, homeopathy, that can still palliate if you're and keep you from evolving. So you can stay in that same pattern. But if you have that evolutionary desire to kind of become better, that is what we're looking for.
So just to expand a little bit, if that's okay, Angelica, on what you just said about the Emerald Heart. So the Emerald Heart, it does work on an energetic level, it's true, but it's really aimed at working on the level of consciousness. So from that approach, if you think of it like this, you have energy and then you have energy healing. So Reiki is probably a very well-known example of energy healing with a bit of light. Then as you go maybe through the different practices, you might come across practices that are more light-based than energy-based. And when they're more light-based, then we're talking more around the level of consciousness. And when you're working with consciousness, many things can fundamentally change. It gives more of an opportunity for that. And the other point is this, that beyond whatever approach a person is using, there is also that person's vibration and that person's innate light. So, for example, Angelica works predominantly in the field of homeopathy, but I think the reason she gets a lot of people come to her is because she has a bright light, and it's her light that attracts people as much as her giving you tools around homeopathy. I think it's both of these things that attract people to her. So, it's you have to think that there's different ways and different things going on all at the same time in all of these things. But the Emerald Heart is really a light-based school. We use the Emerald Heart light. The Emerald Heart light itself is, I would say it contains a very strong aspect of the Christ light, is how I would put it. But we are not religious. I should point that out very clearly.
And that helps people, the Christ light and defining that is the light that precedes, for me, it precedes polarity. It's what came before polarity, and it's love, you know, and if we can kind of keep it simple, and when we connect to it, we can connect to everything, you know, everything that exists and everything. For some people, they have a lot of like religious-based fears, and because of churches and trauma and PTSD around that, and that can keep them from evolving. Can you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, you know, simplifying, and I think going towards these realms of healing and understanding what light and energy is helpful. Someone asked, does the child have to be willing to participate in your work, or can you work through a parent?
No, you can work for a parent. It's different with adults, because adults, you know, they have to make their own choices. And it's not necessarily that you can't work with an adult for another adult that hasn't agreed to be involved in that work. But I personally don't do it, because I think with an adult, they need to come to things of their own volition, unless maybe they're really mentally ill or something like that. But I think with a child, I think of it as very different. I don't think that a child necessarily has to agree to be helped for the parent to approach you. And that's my feeling on it. Other people might feel differently, but that's my take on it.
Right. Okay. Any other questions? I can let Tim, maybe I'll just let you go forward with doing a guided meditation to help us come into the place of blasting out. You know, David Spangler, I put some notes here, and he calls it the blast of light meditation, which I've seen from a lot of other healers, which is finding your authentic vibration, finding the light of love inside of you, and like expanding it to push it out.
So the key point I always come back to, and Angelica knows I talk about this point quite a lot, is the grounding aspect. So, you know, the more we are grounded, the more light we're able to carry. And this is crucial. It's crucial. A lot of spiritual people have a huge problem with being grounded. I get it. This world is a heavy, difficult place in so many ways.
EMF grounding.
What's EMF?
Oh, like electrical magnetic field grounding?
Well, I don't know, because I don't, yeah, I guess so. But it basically, we all know them. We've all encountered them. Spiritual New Age types that are off with the fairies and not grounded at all. So this is not the right way. This is not the real spiritual way. The real spiritual way, if you think about it, what we're looking for is to be balanced between heaven and earth. As human beings, we're held between the heavens and the earth. And we're looking for that balance. And that balance is to be very rooted into Mother Earth, so that the heavens can then pour into us. So whenever I approach anything, I always mention grounding, and I always introduce that into my guided meditation. So I'm going to just ask you now, just to start to take a very open posture. Maybe put your hands on your lap or on your legs facing upwards, just very comfortable. And I want you to try and feel like you're breathing from underneath your feet, from underneath the soles of your feet. Now you might feel a lot of energetic movement there. You might feel like your heart rate. You might feel like everything speeds up or quickens. You might feel a bit almost anxious or even scared. Just don't worry about that. Just find the part of you that is totally fine with everything that's happening right now. The part of you that is completely all right, completely okay. A part of you that isn't making a problem about anything you're feeling or experiencing. And if you get a little bit unsure about anything, just come back to that breathing from underneath your feet. Just allowing the eyes to soften, allowing the eyelids to become a little bit heavier, allowing the throat to relax, jaw to relax, allowing the heart to start to deeply relax. If you have a lot of energetic experience going on at the same time, don't worry. You're not making a problem out of anything. Just allowing your solar plexus just to relax, like you let everything drop down to the earth. Letting the abdomen relax. All the weight dropping down. The earth is pulling and feeding into you at the same time. Just allowing your spine to become a little bit longer. Like you're held. It's like a pole of light holding you deep in the earth and up into the heaven. And that light is getting bigger, starting to go in different directions, out to the sides, forwards, backwards. Allowing everything to drop down into the heart, smiling from the heart. Just breathing down from under the feet. Even if you feel pain or discomfort, just making no problem. Just allowing everything to get brighter and brighter. You don't have to do anything. You're already connected into the cosmos. You're just receiving. nothing to do, nothing to change. Everything is perfect. Everything is as it's meant to be. And we just sit like this for a few minutes, letting the cosmos wash through us. Just feeling the light cascading through you, flowing like a waterfall, or maybe like a wind, a light wind. Just enjoying being loved by the cosmos. Like you could sit here forever, but it would be hard to come out. And just go a little bit deeper Dropping into it a little bit further. Swallowing a few times. Coming back to your feet, breathing from under your feet. Just starting to move the fingers a little bit. Actually opening the eyes. Have a little stretch. How was that for people?
I think that says it all. No.
I think it does. When no one says anything, it tends to mean either it was really bad or good. Okay, we get a bit of feedback. Yeah, so they liked it. It seems to be the consensus. That's good then.
And that highlights the where we need to get back to is a place of quiet and stillness and peace and kind of neutrality, even, and finding that place within us.
Do you see that someone's dog started wagging their tail? Oh, the dog liked it. That's good. So it is through the peace, through the quiet, that God speaks to us. You know, how will we understand that? It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Tim. I'm going to let you go.
Yeah.
Unless you want to stay, you're more than welcome to, as I go through some of the notes. I'll give you guys we'll do a 5-minute break. So you can go to the bathroom and I'll pause the recording. All right, you guys, so what a gift to have teachers like Tim. All the teachers we've had this quarter, they're giving of themselves for all of us. So it's really a gift. And I did put together notes for this section of the class. I just want to quickly touch on a few points in the notes because I did send them out to you. And then we'll talk about the parasite section of notes. Oops, did I put it? All right, so you guys are looking at the entities notes section. You know, Tim does have an actual, like, he kind of zones in on what kind of energy is here, and he tries to see it, and he tries to clear it. And I have some of his process explained here. I believe that when we open ourselves to working energetically, and we do open ourselves up to that when we learn to work with energy healing, we have to learn energy hygiene. We have physical hygiene where we take a shower. We also have to be aware of our own energy hygiene. When I have a negative energy kind of coming at me, sometimes I hear it like a voice or something just doesn't feel right. You have to remember that you have the divine authority within you to say no to it. A lot of people are really nice, you know, and they think that, oh, this thing wants to be with me. Okay, I'll let it be with me. But you have to really, sometimes when you say no, you have to shout it out. So I'll be in my car where it's a place that I'm safe to shout, and I'll be like, leave now. Like, whatever energy is here with me, leave now. That's a useful thing. Another thing that I do, if you muscle test, is I muscle test up the chakras. Like, is there any energy that is disruptive to me? And I muscle test first, second, third, fourth, all the way to the 7th chakra. And then I go up. I say 8th chakra, 9th chakra, 10th chakra. And I kind of try and connect up. And these are the more energetic or spiritual realms. And occasionally I'll feel like there's something that's tapping into my energy at a very high level, and I need to clear it. So showering, water, salt water baths is an amazing way of clearing energy. Prayers with the intention of clearing energy, even the Lord's Prayer can clear energy. David Ashworth in his book talks about yawning clears energy. I wrote in the notes here, a lot of special needs kids, when they have entities, they don't want to take a shower. They refuse showers. And the shower is something I think that my sense is entities don't like, right? Yeah, I don't know why he told the guy I needed to go to the gym, probably because he needed to be in his body more. You know, and sometimes when there's an energy of something that oftentimes this is with a person, like say you've been having interactions with somebody who seems to have, a lot of people have these entity energies that want to feed off of you too, and it creates these cords that don't feel healthy. So you have a relationship with someone and there's cords that don't feel healthy, like something's being distorted, or they're looking to create aggravation or anger in you, or a conflict, or to take something from you. You have to kind of cut that and block that. And you have to realize every time that your mind thinks about somebody or something or an issue, you're connecting to them. You're like reinforcing that cord. So sometimes you really have to kind of like cut the field so that isn't happening anymore. Sometimes I do, I actually like feel like, what substance or energy do I need to put between myself and this person to block it? And I'll literally try to visualize, or I'll muscle test, like, all right, an animal, like a scary animal is going to block this person, so I don't have to have them in my field. Or lead, lead, the energy of lead, and I will surround myself with lead and block the energy and then cut it off. So that's another way that I clear energy. Yeah, somebody wrote exercise can be a great way to release energy, and that's absolutely important. This is about grounding and being in our bodies, and exercise is an important way of building the fire and the light and the fire that can really kind of push the energies out that are not good for us. A lot of Lyme's disease and parasites, they're in there because of the fire that's gone out, right? So we want to build our fire. Kundalini yoga, breath of fire is really wonderful for kind of bringing the fire back in our bodies. Okay. So should we, as homeopaths, do we clear it? I believe the whole time I've been practicing homeopathy, I've been clearing entities. It's part and parcel. And when we give remedies that are sometimes from certain energies, we are saying, recognize this. An entity is a negative energy that has a life form to itself, which is very much like an infection. Okay, so it's just a very broad term without a lot of definition. But sometimes we really have to see, is this a really physical infection and a life form that's just a bacterial thing that our body can deal with, or does it really have a truly separate identity on an energy level? So this book, Working with Subtle Energies by David Spangler, is one that I summarized in these notes. And it's a good summary. You should just read through it or get the book. I think it's helpful. It's very much about how we have our own authentic energy field. And then there's the energy field of things outside of us. And then there's the place where we blend with our environment. Okay? Aggravated energies, infections, they kind of come in and do a kind of identity theft. They say, oh, we're part of you. And your body has to say, no, you're not part of me. And that's what immunity is. Okay? I mean, we've been talking about that concept this whole time in this homeopathy class. Protecting ourselves energetically means I am love, or I am Angelica, or I am Abby, like really like having a strong sense of who we are and our identity and amplifying that. When somebody's walking around with a lot of like vibration of self and who they are, when they walk into the room, you just feel it. They have a presence, right? And so cultivating that presence helps us have a strong energy field and block off negative energies. David's definition here is an entity is an energy that's cut off from the flow of life. So we are all in a cycle of life. We were born and then we die. And when we die, ideally, we go back to light or we go back to heaven. And that's completing a cycle. There are energies out there that don't want to complete the cycle or, have it kind of come back into the natural cycle of things. And that's what disease is. That's what an entity is. Okay. Let's see. Let's scroll down through here. He says there's 3 types of these energies. So a building that has been closed off from the natural cycle of life with the windows closed and everything that has mold in it, a lot of mold has literally smoggy entity energy. It's passive negative energy, and you can feel this in an office, buildings that just have energy cut off from life force. Okay, and so this is why even in our homes, open the windows, bring in sunlight, clean it out. Like, when you're in a space that the energy has been taken care of. And a lot of people are in buildings that have bad energy. And that can be a blockage to healing too. So, yes. Energies like rage, if someone has this intense rage attack, that can be like a jaggedy energy field that is like existing, and it has to be released and dispelled. One thing that I love in my notes here, another energy healer, her name's Natalie LaForest, she spoke in my class once, and she said the importance of staying neutral. And David talks about that too. And that was a point we didn't touch on this morning, was if somebody has this kind of anger that they direct towards you, you can either kind of bounce back and then it can create this like field that builds on itself, or you can, the anger can go right through you. You know, like you just, it's like there's no place for it to land. So staying neutral, like creating a place of that peace that Tim brought us to in that meditation, is a really beautiful place. Being light is often thought of as, oh, I'm happy, I'm up here, I'm like full of dopamine and serotonin, and I'm like almost like manic. That's not necessarily full of light. Full of light can be very chill, very neutral, very zen, and very peaceful. Okay, and then energies can't stick. So, okay. Okay, yeah, entities, absolutely. There are entities who are in the whole family. And entities really are, they're energies that are shared, you know, with our partners. We often have parasitic energies between each other. You know, our partners, I think, are where we have some of the hardest challenges with negative energies, because it's where we feel the most love, and the love is able to transform some of the darkest stuff, right? So, you know, our partners shine light on our dark stuff, but because there's love there, it keeps us evolving. If we can't evolve with our partner, there's a problem. Yeah. All right, so that's it for my notes here. I like what she also says, everyday routines to help us clear our energies. We can kind of be aware of holding ourselves in love, working with angels, staying away from negative, dark stuff. I mean, a lot that's on media, the news, the newscasters, movies, TV shows, and you're absorbing yourself in it, you're locking yourself into negative energies too. So finding that, you know, peace, like, you know, eventually when you heal, you become like this like Amish person where you're kind of boring. But sometimes that's really a good place to be. All right. So, yeah, my husband has that cycle when he's in a very bad place. My husband and child rage before they can communicate. Yeah, and the rage, you know, that rage, let's talk about that when it comes to parasites. So let's put in these ones. All right. Oh, scroll up to the top. So the parallel with parasites is pretty similar. I hope you guys get that. Yeah, sometimes primal scream of rage, just being like, "Arr!" What that does is it releases the stuck energy and pushes it out, you know, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Jumping into like freezing cold water where your body is just like, ugh, you know, you have to like heat your body up when you like go into a cold water plunge. That can be an amazing way of getting your fire going too. There are various ways to get that. When we're in yoga and we're breathing or chanting, that's a way of bringing in a vibration to help clear out negative energies. So on the more like scientific side of things, the energy of parasites is something, you know, that coincides, like Tim said. Parasites, there are 4 times as many parasite species on the planet as non-parasitic. Okay, so this is not a rare thing. And we kind of think that, oh, maybe like tropical places where we get parasites, but no more. I think we've all come to the understanding that we all have parasites, and there's a healthy level of parasites, but when our immune systems are not functioning, an unhealthy level of parasites take over, right? With all of the travel, with all of the climate change, and that's what's leading to more and more parasite infections, likely. is the way that we've been cut off from the cycle of life force itself. So if we think of like an entity as something that's cut off from the cycle of life, and a parasite is something that is stopped evolving, how have we as people cut ourselves off from the cycles, the natural cycles? How have we cut ourselves off from evolution? And that really helps us with managing and evolving past these parasites. That being said, we can all go to get Montezuma's Revenge. Whether it sticks with you forever, it's likely something there's to learn, or you could get over it, you know, after a weekend, and there isn't something to learn. Okay. So, let's see. You know, parasites is the one field that I have found requires this multifaceted approach. There's the energetic side of healing it that Tim really covers, and then there's the pharmaceutical level, which is very physical, or literally cutting it out. You know, I think on some level, a lot of cancer even is a parasitic energy that needs to be cut out. You know, so it can be very physical and very spiritual. And the more that we can kind of see all realms of that and work on that, the better. We've evolved with parasites, and our immune systems, we have white blood cells to fight off viruses and bacteria. We have macrophages and stuff to help with parasites, but on some level, parasites can grow so big and problematic that our body just has to deal with it, like live with it, learn how to live with it. They say one of the reasons that we have a lot of histamine responses these days too is because we are not dealing with the heavy load of parasites that we used to deal with on an evolutionary level. So, Abby wrote, I wonder if people can't clear parasites as easily as others because they aren't on board for the emotional reasons that they have the parasites. And that's absolutely a big part of it. And the hardest parasite cases that I've worked with have been families that are just really not really aware of their own status and aware of their like where they are and where they need to get to. They're allowing a lot of negativity to eke into their life consciously or subconsciously, and they're not doing much about it. And to do something about it means sometimes making major breaks, you know, breaking off a relationship, having a divorce. That can be very hard. You know, being together with a spouse isn't always the best thing for kids. And I have worked with families where the best thing for the kids was that the parents broke up because the parasitic negative energy was so charged and so destructive. Relationships can get parasitically intertwined so that people lose sense of who they are. And then it becomes really parasitic in nature, and you have to separate the two people. And I have seen that between autistic child and mother, where the relationship is so tight and so intertwined, and that there's no ability to separate. It becomes kind of parasitic in nature. And that is what needs to be healed as well. Right. So a lot of patience is required with a lot of like heavy parasite cases. You know, the pharmaceuticals can help, the herbals can help, the homeopathy can help, and the spiritual level can help. And the realization, absolutely. And treating the whole family, having good hygiene, parasite eggs are everywhere. I mean, you know, I don't want people to get super arsenic on me about it, but pets, you know, carry lots of parasites too. And people have weird parasitic relationships with their pets. Okay. So the Sankaran perspective on parasites is that it fits within the malarial miasm. And the malarial miasm is between sora and psychotic. And it's being stuck, persecuted, harassed, hindered. It has a cyclical quality. It comes and it goes, and it comes and it goes. And you just have to kind of like deal with it, but you can't get through it. Okay. Um, Likewise, this feeling can occur in life. So you have a boss that sucks, you have a partner who's mean, and you blame everything on them. The energy of blaming, putting it on something else, or even blaming your kid, when you start to blame your kid for things and realize, like, wow, what am I doing here? Maybe I need to take some parasite medication. Seriously, it's so easy to flip the switch into the blaming mode. And so where are we negatively codependent? Where are we whining and blaming? That's where we need to set boundaries. We need to realize we're the creator of our destiny, our life, our mood, and create some space for ourselves. It's really easy to whine and blame when you don't care for yourself, when you don't put yourself first. Okay, but it's up to you to do that. So really asking those questions, is where I live a problem? Is occupation a problem? Is my family, the extended family, a problem? Why am I being so passive and expecting something in return all the time? That's a victim mentality. Negative codependence limits our own power. We give that power to somebody else for determining our mood. Okay. So the other thing with parasites, I found there's times in the treatment of chronic disease where people get really crazy angry at the parasites, and people are doing protocols where they're seeing parasites come at the stool and they're picking through the poops and looking for the parasites because they want to look at the parasite and be like, you're the one to blame, and they start like cleaning the kid out so intensely that it's like literally like they're being like stripped down, and this itself can be dangerous. So it's true, clearing out the parasites can cause these great improvements in behavior. And I have seen this in kids over and over again. But when people get on the bandwagon of like, it's a war with the parasite, I'm going to keep killing it, you go into kill mine mentality, you start to kill your own child. Okay? You start to drain their adrenals, drain their life force. It's not healthy. Have you guys seen that? So, I believe if you're going to use an axe to kill the parasite, use it for a short term. A short term of a pharmaceutical or a short term of chlorine dioxide or something like that. Or, some people are using like, what is it called? Turpentine. Some people now are taking turpentine. It should be short term, not a regular thing, because those things are ultimately toxic, right? So let's see, the parasite symptoms. You guys probably all know the parasite symptoms. So we've talked about when symptoms are present in a kid and then they manifest them, that it's often the energy of that thing. So when kids have parasites, often there's an aggressive energy coming at them. And that's the aggression of the parasite themselves. And I tell that to parents. I'm like, it's not your kid. I know that your kid is not wanting to throttle you. Your kid does not want you to be miserable. It's the energy that's controlling your kid, attempting to control you. This week I worked with a mom who's a veterinary technician, has every parasite under the sun. She would, look at poop samples of all people's pets, clean the pets would scratch them. I mean, every Lyme, co-infection, Bartonella, parasites up the wazoo. And she was so like, I love you animals, I want to help you. And she didn't like set the boundary. She was too actually empathic, and allowed all that energy to drain her, and needs to learn boundaries with these aggressive negative energies that are present in animals. You know, and animals are the vector of a lot of disease. A lot of these infections come through animals. And so on some level too, the animal world is so out of sorts, especially with pets. Who are the most codependent creatures are our pets, right? They're there, we feed them, and then they make us happy. It's a very parasitic relationship. And then we get some parasites, you know. That being said, there is the idea that we get healthier from that, you know. Who knows? Sina really represents, the homeopathic remedy Sina really represents the materia medica of parasites. So hitting people, dilated pupils, seizures, the child is not themselves. And clearing entities means giving Sina too, you know. Incessant whining, water obsession. You guys know the whole deal. I wrote down so many symptoms here. The weird gut symptoms, the weird eating symptoms. The pimples on the scalp, I think is an interesting and good one. A lot of like pimples around the face. Any questions that you guys have? So I put in the notes like a full moon is a good time to kill parasites. The new moon is a good time to get rid of them. I don't remember where I learned that from. And I'm not even sure that's completely accurate because I feel like in each case, it's very different. There are remedies that you can give around the time of the full moon to prevent the entity nature from attacking. So why full moon? Under the sun of the full moon is when everything replicates. Like the moon has this quality to bring in the energy of not just parasite, but bacteria, virus, mold. Everything likes to grow. It's a beautiful growing energy, but it can grow the worst part of us too. So I often do a combination of Sina plus an herbal anti-parasitic at the time of the full moon, the day before, day of, and day after, maybe 5 days around it if it's really problematic. And then if it's really problematic, doing the same thing at the new moon. Magnesium deficiency we talked about last week is huge with parasites. Okay. You know, I put a malnutrition and poor growth plus weight gain. I've seen like some kids with tons of parasites, they're massive. And I don't quite understand it, but there's something about the kids that the parasites are not preventing their growth, that they are just huge. Then there's some kids who aren't growing at all. It's hard to say. Eosinophils, histamine is big with parasites. What did I do for the vet tech mom? Yeah, right now we're doing nozodes. And I did a massive, I recorded a guided meditation for her to realize what she was allowing in and that she had to be the one to push it out. You know, that she was not setting boundaries, healthy boundaries for herself. So really her kid needed phosphorus and they need the remedy, some nozodes. So, yeah. Okay. The trouble with parasites is that there aren't great labs that say this is what the parasite is. Parasites are intelligent. You know, it's unfortunate that we use so much pharmaceuticals for killing bacteria and viruses when I do believe our body can do that with the help of homeopathy. The real tricky ones, the smart ones, are the parasites. They're the ones that have a much more intelligent way of evading the immune system and going to places deeper in our body that our body has a hard time getting to, going even into the brain. I mean, everything, you know, viruses, it can go to the brain, but so can parasites. That's something that Tim, when he's assessing where an entity comes in, he asks, is this in the central channel, like the central nervous system, or is this in the aura, the auric body of the person, on the mental, just the mental level or the emotional level? When it's really central, it's a lot harder. Okay. So I really personally feel that intuiting and feeling into what could be problematic is very important. Dr. Klinghardt is big in clearing parasites, and he does it with muscle testing, right? So I listed here all of these homeopathic remedies for helping support clear parasites. So Sina is one very well-known one. But you know, you kind of want to support the core energy of the person. So if you're gonna, you need to clear fear. If fear in the central nervous system is maintaining the cause for the parasite to be there, you need to clear the fear. And that could be giving remedies like stramonium and belladonna and hyoscyamus. If the maintaining cause of the parasites is suppressed immunity, you want to give remedies like carcinosin and silica and thuya. If you have like major GI problems with the GI, and often that's a lot of emotions held in different organs of the GI system. There's amazing remedies specific to clear parasites from different parts of the gut. So chelidonium helps clear parasites from the liver and gallbladder. China is the remedy from that helps heal malaria, the quinine. So that helps clear malarial type energy that's throughout the body. Colosynthis helps heal parasite energy due to anger held in the gut. Dioscorea helps heal parasite energy in the gut because I feel like I'm being forced to do something I don't want to do. Yeah. Right, I tried seeing a 6C to help with my teeth grinding. My legs ached. I felt weak, especially my legs. Is that a sign of parasites? I would say, yeah. You know, now there's a question. So parasites is this huge category. You know, you could have worms. You could have, you know, Lyme is included in parasites. I would say when you feel things in the legs, that's something that your body is trying to push something out and ground and release it. So that's a good sign. So I would continue with it. I find it's very rare for me to work with a case that at some point we don't have to deal with the parasites. Dioscorea is the remedy. It has progesterone, the energy of progesterone in it. And it's often this twisting feeling in the intestines. And it kind of correlates with the hormone progesterone and also like, you know, being stuck at home, doing the caretaking and the housewife and not wanting to kind of do that, feeling trapped at home. Dioscorea is great for the gut. Euphorbium is great for a bound up, tight, wrapped up feeling in the gut. And then there's a lot of homeopathic remedies for the neurological and seizure symptoms. So parasites can really lodge themselves in ways to cause chronic inflammation to the point of seizures. And a lot of kids with seizures, I would say maybe even the majority of them that I deal with, it's parasites ultimately, and like this major stagnation from parasites that we're dealing with. In some of those cases, I've healed kids with seizures and tics and twitches only with homeopathy. And then in some of those other cases, it's kind of what the parents are open to. You know, if the mom's like, I'm scared of pharmaceuticals, I'm never going to go there, we do just the homeopathy, we can do it. You know, I treated a case of a girl with seizures and movement disorders with a ton of parasites, and she started off needing stramonium and cicuta for the parasites, for the seizures. Stramonium and cicuta help calm down the seizures, and then various nosodes, the strep nosode, some worm parasites. I believe I gave her the remedy for hookworm. And then pulsatilla. She was this pulsatilla. That pulsatilla Staphylos agria energy where it's like, oh, I'm so sweet. Oh, it's okay. And, you know, no boundaries and like allowing things to come in and affect them can make you really parasitic. You know, I've seen like, you know, that type of energy field that that's too nice draw in way too much energy. You know, when like girls in high school, they were like the mean girls. I realize now, like I wasn't one of those mean girls, but I kind of wish I had been. Because sometimes that like bitchy behavior is a good thing. You know, like you're like saying no. Like when you've got the hand, that's like I'm not, that's like allowing, like putting some boundaries up, you know? Of course there's other bitchy behaviors that are awful, but that kind of too nice pulsatilla staphys agria place, which is what I was in, really allowed me to kind of get my gut messed up. The mean girls were my defenders. Yay. Yeah, I was that neutral. I tried to be super like nobody knew who I was. Like it just, everything, all that energy went right through me, which was probably also a very good strategy on some level. All right. So, also a lot of herbs we know are good as anti-parasitics. We know that pumpkin seeds are good as anti-parasitics. It's also, you can take homeopathic pumpkin seed. The male fern is known for being good for parasites, and you can also take that homeopathically, Felix moss. It's really cool. Felix moss homeopathically has this information of being like really stuck in the old age. Like it's a very ancient plant, and it's for people who are like really unevolved on some level. You know, like they're stuck in time at like a very old place and not like really willing to evolve past it. And so Felix moss is great for that. Teucrium, which is the same as catnip, is really great. Yeah. Artemisia, which is mugwort, is really good for seizures and parasites. Okay. And that kind of passivity that allows parasites to come in can also, like magcarb and magmir and gnatphos. I have great remedy cases of like remedies like just like gnatphos. I had this kid who had tons of parasites, and they did the CD protocol. They did pharmaceuticals. It just didn't stop until I gave the kid gnatphos. Gnatphos is, I'm lonely and I'm nervous, but I want a friend, but my friend's gonna be like, have this parasitic energy and, you know, like really emotional. And same with magcarb and magmir. And these are kids who like get lost in relationships and want relationships, but don't know how to stand up for themselves in relationships. And that can precipitate and create the conditions for parasites, right? So in your notes, I didn't put pulsatilla, but put them in your notes here because I realized staphys agria and pulsatilla, it's that sweet passive behavior that just brings in the parasites. And I put this detoxification after the parasites have been killed. I don't even know where I got this from, but I put that in there. I kind of have to re-research that. I wrote these notes probably 4 or 5 years ago, and they just sat on my computer. So there are nosodes for specific parasites. So there's a roundworm nosode, a hookworm nosode, a fluke nosode, a pinworm nosode. There are not really a ton of materia medica built on them. I have some cool provings of like the line tick and mosquito and the leech. Those exist. But I would say the general themes are what I've shared with you already, right? And what we've learned in the entities class. And then I would say you can muscle test around these as well. You know, the flukes can be in the lungs and in the liver and create a lot of stagnation in this upper GI, feeling like you can't breathe, like cloggy feelings around the gallbladder and the liver. So the fluke can be a really good nosode as well for that. All right. All right. So these are just some quotes from kids who are, you know, needed parasite remedies. Throwing tantrums, worse before the moon, the new moon, Yeah, a lot of sensory stuff, slamming, pushing, wrapping, wriggling, um, yeah, speech problems. I think you guys definitely have that. So, you guys remember my friend Veer? He has a whole chapter in his book on parasites. And I want to end this class on the idea that when we're always searching outside of ourselves, when we're always looking for love outside of ourselves, we're trying to create codependent relationships, and that predisposes us to parasites. Okay? He's like, he wrote in his book, I had a powerful dream where I was being led to a wise woman into this room full of people, and everybody was checking each other out, kind of like, what are you? Who are you? What can you do for me? And it made me really uncomfortable. And the wise woman told him, this is the entity of always searching. Okay, always searching. And so parasites can exist when we're always giving our power away and we're always searching for somebody to fill some need of ourselves. Now, you can have healthy relationships where you are supporting needs in each other. You know, I hope to God that my relationship with Ryan is that, you know, I'm kind of not as structured. He's more structured. He does my IT thing and he does the business side and I do this side. And it has a symbiosis that feels healthy and it works and we're in service. But, you know, in some ways, some people can be in relationships where everything is provided to them, and for them to really evolve, they need to, you know, start working or start providing or start, you know, finding their gifts and really allowing their gifts to shine in the world. Okay. So he talks about unconditional love and the love that really can come from within us, to really heal the cords that create that parasitism, that kind of unhealthy codependency. And this is really why my last class, I want to focus on love, self-love, on our ability to source our love from within us. And so I have one last guest speaker lined up for you guys. And she basically just started like recording into her phone, I love you, and playing it back to herself. And she started this whole movement that was huge on basically playing recordings, telling yourself how much you love yourself back to yourself. And a whole book and movement came out of it. And her name's Sarah, and she's going to talk next week with us. So that's pretty much it. I went through that pretty quickly. Do you guys have any questions? Or have anything to add? Beth said hookworm is getting hooked into things, having like some person like hook into you with, you know, maybe even something manipulative, like if you do this, if you don't do this, then I'm going to do that, you know, manipulating you to do things, and that can be hookworm. All right. Well, thank you guys. I feel like we really covered a lot of territory. Fortunately, we didn't go too far over time. And yeah, hooked on media, hooked into electronics, and a lot of kids. I have seen kids who are like literally their iPad is a part of their body, and energetically, I've seen energies come out of it and like enter the child through its crown chakra, almost like an alien. This sounds crazy, but almost like a weird alien entity energy come in through the media. And that needed to be like literally pulled out of their body. And the cord with the media needs to be cut. Portals open up too. Is there anything you'd like to add, Mallory, since you've worked a lot with this?
Yeah, actually, I do healing work for you guys that don't know me. And in the process of doing that, you feel and you experience things you never thought you would. Like, for me this year, it's been a lesson in like psychic attack. which like I've heard other people talk about it. And honestly, I thought it was like total bullshit. I'm like, yeah, whatever. That's not real. Except I experienced it this year and I did all the energy work around it. I took, let me see, what were the best remedies that I had? Thuya was amazing. BBB and the whole parasite kit. Like those three, that was like magical to just do like protection on my auric field, protection to my psychic energy. When I would take parasite remedies, I would literally speak to the remedy and I would say, I love you. Thank you for supporting me. Please remove any parasitic dynamics, relationships, energy feeding on me. Please remove any ways that I am parasitic. And I would also intend, like, if I am being parasitic or if I am in a parasitic dynamic, please expose that to me. Show it to me. And the reason why it was so important is because sometimes the energy work isn't enough. Sometimes the remedy isn't enough. Sometimes praying isn't enough, because what you have to ultimately do is you have to act. You have to cut off. You have to cut off. I want to like make this known. You have to cut off the parasite. Mm-hmm. Or if you're the parasite and all of a sudden you discover, holy shit, I'm parasitic, what happens is you have to change that. You have to change the dynamic. You have to throw a wrench into the behavior, or you need to change something within you. You need to go deep into that part of you that is allowing this parasitic dynamic to go on. So with my year of like psychic attack and entities and all this other stuff that I was like, nah, whatever, not real. Ultimately, what I had to do is I had to speak up for myself, which thank you, Staph aureus. Thank you, Lac maternum. Thank you, all the matrodonal remedies ever, because I feel like they gave me the shift passively within my energy to help me move into a state where I could finally speak up for myself and I could stand up for myself against someone who had a lot of influence and power in a community that I was in. And I had to just be like, I don't care, because what you're doing isn't okay. And I'm going to cut it off. And the only way that I could cut it off, it wasn't through energy work, it wasn't through the remedies. The final step was, I need to write you a letter and I need to let you know, I know what's going on. I can see what's happening. I don't allow it, right? So I feel that when you embark on this journey of tuning into parasitic energy, tuning into entities, all of that, you also have to ask yourself, A, why did I attract this in the first place, right? Like, what allowed it? For me, it was wanting to be accepted, wanting to be loved, wanting approval, right? And I could go down that track and say, oh, well, I know where it came from, whatever. Point is I had to like make a decision that I had to see that aspect of myself and say, you know what? I see you, little girl who wants all that love. I see that you want approval. I see that you want attention. I see that you want that, but we can't operate from that space anymore because it's not healthy. It's not okay, right? So when you go down this track, you have to get real with yourself and you have to get honest with yourself as to like, why is the dynamic happening? Because I feel like it's always in support. It's always for your soul's growth and your soul's evolution, even for our kids. And then you have to ask beyond, what are the remedies? What's the energy work? What's the prayer? What's the binaural beat? Whatever it is that you're using to clear this, you have to ask God, universe, source, Mother Mary, whoever it is you connect with, what's my action step? Because you have to act, right? Like sometimes it's not enough to just be doing things in this spiritual realm. We have to be making physical, actual changes in our bodies, in our environments, right? Like I could sit all day and visualize, I weigh 110 pounds, but if I never get my ass off the couch, I'm never gonna get to that weight, right? So it's the same idea when it comes to any of this work is it's the true embodiment and the true action step that goes along with it.
Yeah.
So I think I'm done.
Ah, beautiful. I knew I needed a closure. And I feel like I just passed the baton to you. And I was That's so great. But then what, you've worked so much with moms who have parasitic relationships with their own kids. And that's kind of a tough thing, right? I mean, it's hard to say that. That's like a painful thing to even hear. But I've seen it with myself. I think we've all seen it when we've allowed ourselves to create codependencies with our kids that have prevented our own growth and their own growth.
I feel like a lot of time that comes from guilt, like with my son, who has an autism diagnosis, but like now that I look at it, he probably is more pans and pandas more than anything else. But, at the time that he was diagnosed, pans and pandas just wasn't as relevant. So we just didn't know that was even an option. But I feel like between us, our parasitic dynamic really began because I felt guilty. I had postpartum depression with him. That was really bad. It was so bad I didn't even like recognize I was going through it as I was going through it, right? And I felt like what happened is I had this guilt within me where I was just, I'm going to do everything in my power to make this up to you. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that you're okay. Then I had the guilt on top of, from the time when I first told my dad I was pregnant, my dad said to me, not I love you, not congratulations, not I'm so excited. He said, don't inoculate that child. And I rolled my eyes. I'm like, whatever. I thought he was nuts. Because he's like a huge conspiracy theorist, right? Which like now I'm like, okay, like those things kind of turn out to be true, right? So my dad was like definitely like he knew something. But that was like the first thing my dad said to me. And then a week before I was due to give birth to my son, the Dr. Oz baby book came out. And I was like all about Dr. Oz at that point. So I wasn't like woke whatsoever. I was just following whatever was on TV, like, oh, Oprah likes him, so I'm going to like him, right? So it comes out, and instantly the first page that I open up to was about the vaccine autism connection. And I read it, and something in my heart went, this book is saying it's not true, but something is telling me it's true, okay? And I had many other instances where I was just like, we shouldn't vaccinate, we shouldn't vaccinate, we shouldn't vaccinate. And my husband has 3 kids from his previous marriage, and he basically said to me, you're not a doctor, you don't know what you're talking about, that's crazy. All of my kids are vaccinated, they're fine. So I went along with it, and we went on a very delayed schedule. And, I thank God for that every day, because I feel like if we hadn't, my son would be very, very severe. But going back to it is that I carried that guilt in my heart for so long. Like I did that to him. Like if I would have listened to every sign that I had been given, like he wouldn't be the way he is. And it's my fault. So it's my job to like fix that. It's my job to take care of him. And sorry guys. And so sometimes you operate from that place too. Like I've made this mistake. It's my fault. I'm punishing myself. I'm the reason this is happening. And so it's my job to make sure that he's okay. And so I've seen this with all the moms that I've worked with for whatever reason, whether it was a child with autism or PANS or PANDAS or, mold or ADHD, where even if it wasn't something as clear cut as vaccine to then regression, it's other things that they feel like they brought this in, they did this to themselves. Another thing I've seen a lot is moms who have had abortions. And so they believe like then the child that they decided to have who winds up with some type of diagnosis, like they only have the diagnosis because they had an abortion like earlier in their life or whatever. So I can say for myself, and I can say in my experience, that I think a lot of times parasitic relationships between mothers and children, especially children who are ill or medically fragile, I think a lot of it comes from a place of guilt. And I think a lot of it comes in from a place of, actually, it's a lot of tenderness and love, but it's trying to be responsible for the healing because you feel responsible for the reason why the healing has to take place in the first place, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So when I work with the moms around that dynamic, a lot of it is giving the power back to the child and then giving over the responsibility of the healing journey back to God or whatever higher power they believe in, and surrendering to that path to say, I understand that all of this happened the way that it happened, but I forgive myself. I love myself. This child is so much more powerful than I've given them credit for. And so I'm going to hand the power back. Right. And I even visually, you can imagine all of the power you give back to them, and you see them as strong. You see them as robust. Right. And then anything left over, it's like you hand it back to God. You give it back. Because you know that the healing is not, you're not in control of that. We're the vessel, we get the signs and we follow those signs, right? Every single one of us in this class probably had this intuitive feeling, or just our hearts felt really connected to Angelica. We're like, oh, I'm going to take this course, right? That's you doing your job. That's you on the path. It's you, oh, I know my kid needs this remedy. I'm going to give the remedy. But then you're not responsible for the healing. You're only responsible to listen to the cues that you get and then follow through on them, right? So action, again, is so important. So yeah, I know I kind of went off on a tangent, but.
Oh, it's a beautiful, beautiful tangent. And I think we're so blessed just to have your openness and your heart sharing that story. And as mothers who are connected to our hearts, I think we all feel this journey together. It's the journey of the Divine Mother, finding herself through surrender, through love. And what do parasites ultimately teach us is love, is how to mostly love, not just by giving ourselves completely, but loving ourselves. Sometimes the ultimate act of love is cutting away and creating distance.
Yeah, and that's where, to bring it full circle, I found that the BBB remedy is so powerful. When I take that remedy, it's like I literally feel this field of protection surround me. And, Angelica's taught about Lyme, and the thing that always stands out to me with Lyme is victimhood, and we can get caught up in our own victimhood. We can get caught up in the victimhood of others. But ultimately, I always ask, protect me from that energy, help me see, right? And I can feel that. I don't know, Angelica, when you take it, but when I take it, it's I feel so protected and I feel so safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, I think that we've had an awesome class, and I'm really grateful for you. Would you like to close the class on a meditation, Mallory?
Sure.
That's about that releasing the guilt and love, learning those lessons of love. As it's just holiday gift. It's just so needed as we're working our way through December.
All right, so everyone take a moment and close your eyes. Take a nice deep breath. And as you're breathing, just allow yourself to get calm. Imagine any disruptions in your mind or in your energy field leaving now. Anything interfering with your ability to forgive yourself and to love yourself and to release this guilt, remove it now. You may even feel in your body where you have resistance. And just imagine that you can scoop out the resistance. You can let all that resistance go. And as you do that, just come back to your heart. Feel the pure love that you have within you. Feel the love that you have for your child. Feel the way that that love is active in every cell in your body. And in your mind or out loud, say the words, I love myself. I forgive myself. I respect myself. And as you do that, feel your boundaries just getting stronger. And imagine now that you can just remove all the parasitic energy from your field, including those beliefs, including the thoughts and the patterns around blaming yourself. Clear out all patterns connected to hanging on to guilt, because you know in your mind that guilt doesn't make anyone better, doesn't change the past. Guilt does not heal your child. And just pull the guilt out of your heart. Pull it out of your heart and give it back to Mother Earth. You can set the intention that all guilt anywhere in your body, anywhere in your energy field, anywhere through your ancestral line, that you're going to give all that guilt back, and Mother Earth will transmute it for you. She will shift it for you. And as you do this, you even tell your relatives, you tell your ancestors, you tell the people within your orbit that they are allowed to let go of the guilt too. And know that as you give yourself permission to release your guilt, you make it easier for others to release theirs. And when we let go of guilt, we can let go of what's hidden. And when we release what is hidden, we are able to see truth. We're able to see light. We're able to see our own power. And we're able to see our children's power. Take a nice deep breath, bringing in more light. Breathing in more of yourself that you've lost. Breathing in the parts that you've disconnected from. And welcome them back home. Welcome them back to you. And imagine now that your child's soul enters in. And let yourself go back to the first moment that you held them. See them as that newborn baby. Feel that connection of love between the two of you. And say to your child, I see you. I see all of you. I see the love in you. I see your light. I see your power. And tell your child, guide them and say, call your own power back to you now. And now imagine your child now, the current age that they are, and feel the love between the two of you. Feel that connection from your heart to their heart, and from their heart to your heart. And ask God, the universe, Jesus, whatever higher power it is that you believe in, ask for your connection to be purified, that all parasitic, all disempowering energy, all lower vibrations, to please leave now and never return. As you feel it leaving and exiting, take a moment now and call in what it is that you do want for yourself, for your family. And now ask, what is my next step? What is the next action step I am meant to take to turn that into a reality? And once you've received that guidance, just take a moment, feel the love again inside your body. Feel the love in your heart. Thank and disconnect from your child, seeing all of their energy going back to them and calling all of your energy back to you. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I definitely have an action step for myself. I hope you guys all do. And this class, what a blessing. I mean, I didn't really try to follow too much of the structure, and it just flowed. And I'm hoping that this will move with you guys, shift you guys, take you to that next level. That energy that was psychic attack for you, Mallory, that is real. There was some challenges this fall for a lot of people, and we need to upgrade, let go of the old, say no more, cut it away, take the action steps that we need so that 2020 hits and we've got a clean slate. Okay? All right, you guys, I'm going to end it now. All right.